Everybody, welcome back to the channel. In this video we are going to be building the technical documentation page. Now this is part of the 5 certification project for the FreeCodeCamp curriculum. Okay, so let's get started. So this is what we are going to be building. What we are supposed to build will have to look similar to what we have currently on the screen. So it's going to be a technical documentation. You have your menu here, and then you have the documentation itself on the right side. Now when you click on any of these menu, it should send you to the part of the page where that header is. So for example, when I click hello world, it sends me to hello world, and if I click declaring variables, it sends me to declaring variables. Okay, so let's get started. So we have our index.html page here, and we also have our styles.css. So the first thing we want to do is want to write our markup, or in other words, want to write our HTML. And once we are done with that, we will work on the styling. So we have about 15 user stories. So these are the requirements that we'll be basing our page on. So we'll be using these user stories as a guide for us to build our technical documentation page. And at the end of it all, we should pass all of these tests that we have here. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we want to declare our doc type. So we'll say doc type, then we'll add an HTML attribute to tell the browser that this is an HTML document. Next up, we want to write our HTML element like so, and then within our HTML element we will have two elements, namely the head element and then the body element. Okay, so within the body element, we want to have some meta elements. Meta element is a self-closing, so element. The first meta element, we'll give it an attribute of char set, and we'll set it to utf-8. And the second meta element will be the viewport. So we'll give it a name attribute, and the value will be viewport. Also, we'll give it a content attribute, and then we'll give it a value of width equal to device width, and then we'll set the initial scale to 1.0. Okay, so next up, we also, for accessibility sake, we also want to add another meta element, and this one will have a name attribute to the value of description, and then we also give it a content attribute, and the value of the content attribute is going to be free resources. Okay, so this is what I decided to build. Okay, so the FreeCodeCamp project was a JavaScript documentation, but I decided to build a documentation of free developer resources, Yeah, so I also encourage you to switch it up a little bit. You don't need to do exactly the same thing as they have done. Okay, now moving on, let's add a title element, and we'll give it a title of free resources, or let me say free developer resources, or I would say free resources for developers. Yeah, you can name it whatever you want. All right, next up, we would want to link our let me stretch this so that we have more space to work with. So you can click here for a preview, or you can also click this icon on the right hand here. Now when you click this icon, it will open a new page for you. So you have a whole page for your preview. So that's what we are going to be using in this tutorial. Okay, so we want to add a link, or we want to link our styles.css to our index.html. So we say rel and give it a value of style sheet, and then we also give it an href attribute with the value of styles.css, which is the name of the file. Okay, so for example, for us to test if this is working, let me say body and say background color, give it a value of green. All right, so now we know that our CSS is linked successfully to our HTML. Okay, so let me just clean this up. We'll come back to it later. Again, if you want to get a preview, you can click on this icon here. That is what is making me get the preview on a whole page like this. Okay, so let's continue. All right, next up, we want to focus on the body element. Okay, so with the body element, as you can see, we have we are supposed to get a main element, and when you look at number 8, we are also supposed to get a nav element. So what I'm going to do is we are going to first of all add our nav elements like so. Okay, so these are going to be the two children of the body element. So the nav element and then the main element. Okay, because when you look at the final page, you see we have the two main elements. So we have the navigation here, then we have the main elements with the documentation itself. So first, let's start working on the main elements. We'll come back to the nav elements as we progress. So the first user story says that you can see a main element with a corresponding ID with a value of main doc, and this is going to contain the main page's content. So let's add an ID to our main element. The value is going to be main-doc. Now, within the main-doc element, you can see several elements, each with a class of main session. Okay, so we should have several session elements, each with a class of main session. There should be a minimum of 5. So let's add our first session, and the first element within each. Okay, so each with a class of main session. Okay, so each of our session should have a class, and the value of the class is going to be main session. Okay, now the first element within each main session should be a header element. So let's add a header element. We have our header element here, and okay, and this header element should contain text that describes the topic of that session. Okay, so we'll get to it. So for example, let's say the first header is going to be introduction, right? As we have here, we have the first header, which is an introduction. Okay, so introduction, and each session element with a class of main session should also have an ID that corresponds with the text of each header contained within it. Okay, so any spaces should be replaced with underscores. All right, so for example, if the header has an heading of JavaScript and Java, then the ID should be JavaScript underscore end underscore Java. Okay, so for the first one, we have our ID. The ID is going to be introduction as well. There's no spaces, so there's no need to bring our underscore. Okay, so 5. The main session element should contain at least 10 P elements total, not each. So at the end of it all, you should have at least 10 paragraph elements in your main element. Okay, so let's add a P tag for our introduction. So I have already this Google Sheet here, which has the text for my documentation that I will be creating. So this is the first paragraph. I'm going to copy and paste it here. Then I'll duplicate the paragraph. So I'll copy and paste the second paragraph. And then I'll do same for the third paragraph as well. You know what? Let me just make it I'll just make it 2 paragraphs. Let me just keep it short. Okay, so next up, we need another session for the next session element. So I'm just going to copy this and I'll paste it below it like so. Okay, so now for this session, the ID is going to be FreeCodeCamp. Okay, so once again, this is what I am building. So I have FreeCode, like these are free developer resources. So I have FreeCodeCamp, Code Newbie podcast, Scramble podcast. There are 10 of them. So I'll just copy this. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this. So I'll click here and also hold Option. If you're on Windows, you can hold Alt and then click here. That way I can type at multiple places at the same time. So I'm just going to name it FreeCodeCamp. Okay, so the ID is FreeCodeCamp. The header, the text for the header is also FreeCodeCamp. It should be the same thing. Okay. Now I'm just going to clean this up. Okay, so next up, I am going to create a list for these. So I'll have a UL, and then inside the UL we'll have our LI element, which will be used for the list. So LI, like so. We're going to have 4 of them. So I'll click and hold Option and Shift, and then I'll click down to create 4 of them. Okay, so all right. Okay, so now let's move on to the Code Newbie podcast. So for that one, again, I don't need to write the whole thing again. It's just the same thing. So I'm just going to copy this. I'll copy it and then paste it below it. So what I will change is this one here. going to be code newbie underscore podcast. Then we'll have the same thing here as well. Code newbie podcast. Okay, so I'm going to copy this and replace it with what we have here. I'll do the same for the second paragraph. And then I'll also do the same for this list here. So the first one is going to be computer science student. The second one is going to be musicians, truck drivers, stay-at-home moms. So we'll have musicians, truck drivers, stay-at-home moms. So the Code Newbie is a podcast where they interview developers, so you can check them out as well. All right, so this is what we have so far. So we have our introduction, we have our FreeCodeCamp, we have Code Newbie podcast. Yeah, so let's continue. Once again, I'm just going to copy the session. Okay, I'll copy it and then I'll paste it below it. So the next thing we are going to do is the Scrimba podcast. So for the Scrimba podcast, it's just one paragraph. So I'll clean everything here. Okay, so I'll be left with just one paragraph to work with. So I'll clean the paragraph. Come here, copy this, and then paste it. Okay, so now I'll just clean this one and write Scrimba instead of Code Newbie. So Scrimba podcast, like so. Okay, so the next thing is this book, How to Learn to Code and Get a Developer Job. It's a book by Quincy Larson, the founder of FreeCodeCamp. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to copy this. I'm copying and pasting so that it will move fast. So I just copy this and then also you can check the description below. I'm going to add a timestamp so that if you want to forward it, you can forward it and know exactly where you want to go. So I'll just copy the title from here and paste it here. So this is going to be get a dev book, but we have to add the underscore, don't forget. Okay, so let me once again copy this and let's continue. So this is going to be build a portfolio. That's also a very short ebook. Build a portfolio. I'll leave links in the description below to all the resources that I'm mentioning here, so you can have a look at them. Let me copy this and then I'll paste it here like so. Okay, so let's continue. All right, now the next one I'm going to do is hash node. Okay, so I'll say hash node here and I'll clean this one up and also write hash node. I'll just copy the text from here and then paste it. Okay, so I'll copy this one. Yeah, gradually we are getting there. We're almost done. So the next one is no CS degree. So I'll just come here, no CS degree. No CS degree, like so. Then I'll clean this one, copy the description for no CS degree. Okay, so these 2 paragraphs, so I'll just cut this one out and create a new p tag for it. Also, I'm going to leave a link to the source code in the description below as well, so you can have a look at that if you want to. Okay, so next up is first timers only. So I'll copy the whole section. I'll delete one of the paragraph because the next one is only 1 paragraph long. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to change the header. So the header for this one is first timers only. First timers only. Also change the ID, so it's going to be first underscore timers underscore only, like so. All right, let's copy it and paste. We're almost done. Yeah, so last but one, then we are done. So this one is called Pramp. Pramp is a website where you can practice mock interviews. So you can also check it out as well. So you have Pramp, and then the header also has to be Pramp. Copy it. And finally, the last resource is going to be MDN. Okay, so MDN docs. All right, MDN, so there should be no space, it has to be underscore. So let me just copy this one right here and paste it. Okay, so now for these ones that we have HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Python, and accessibility, the elements I'm going to use is code, because when you read this one, it says the main session element should contain at least 5 code elements total. So not each, at least you should have a total of 5 code elements in your HTML, so, or in your main element. So I'm going to write code like so. Then I'll hold Option and Shift, or Alt and Shift if you're on Windows. Then I'll click down to replicate it. So 5 times. The first one is going to be HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Python, and then let me write accessibility for the 5th one. All right, now let me add one more paragraph. Okay, I'll just copy this and just paste it here like so. Then finally, we have our reference. So I'm going to copy this one here because it's just a single paragraph. So I'll change the ID to reference, change the header text also to reference as well. And then I am going to add this. Okay, so I'm going to say turn this one into a link. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. So I'll say A. That's because you see over here, the reference has a link. So I'm just trying to do the same thing. So I'll give it an href attribute of youtube.com/@bvs dev. Okay, and I'll give it a target attribute also. The value is going to be _blank. All right, so that's it for the main element. So we are done with the main element. Now let's go back up and work on the nav. Okay, so for the navigation, it says the main element should contain at least 5 code elements. So we've already added that. The main session element should contain at least 5 li items. We've already added that. As you can see, we have some li here. This is 4. We also have another 4 here, which makes it 8. So we have that. Now for number 8, you can see a nav element with a corresponding ID of navbar. So we have our nav element. Let's give it an ID of navbar. Okay, the navbar element should contain at least one header element which contain text that describes the topic of the technical documentation. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a header inside our nav. So header, and we are going to give it a text. So the text that we are going to give it is free dev resources. Okay, so now next up, additionally, the navbar should contain link or a element with a class of navlink. There should be one for every element within the class main session. Okay, so we need a link. Okay, and we want to give each one a class of navlink. Also, each one is going to have an href. The reason why each one is going to have an href is because each element with a class of navlink should contain text that correspond to the header text within each session, right? And when you click on a navbar element, the page should navigate to the corresponding session. So for example, when we come here, if we click on introduction, we should have introduction. If we click on hello world, we should be navigated to hello world. Okay. All right. So what I am going to do now is I am going to click Option and Shift. So hold Option and Shift and then press down. So I'm going to repeat that 12 times because I have 12 main session elements. Okay, so the introduction and the reference and then 10 of the resources. So all of them add up to 12. So I'm just going to repeat them 12 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the first one, hash. The first one is going to be FreeCodeCamp. And then the text will also be FreeCodeCamp. The second one is Sorry, the first one should be introduction. So I'll click on Alt so that I can type at two different places at the same time. So I'll say introduction. I'll click here, then click on Alt or Option, and also click here to write FreeCodeCamp. Okay, let me add the hash symbol. The third is going to be code newbie podcast. Okay, but for this one, because there is a space, we delete the space and add an underscore. Okay, the fourth is going to be Scrimba podcast. Again, we are going to delete the space here and add an underscore instead. Next up, we'll do get a dev job. Let me copy it first. Underscore, another underscore. Next up will be build a portfolio. Again, let's add the underscore. Should be build a portfolio. All right, so next up, we want to add hash node. So hash node. I forgot the hash. Don't forget the hash from here. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. Okay, so hash node. From hash node, we go to no CS degree. I'll just copy it, bring my hash symbol, and then paste no CS degree. From no CS degree, we go to first timers only. Again, I'll copy it. Underscore. And then I'll do prompt. I'll bring my hash symbol here. Next up is mdn docs. So mdn underscore docs mdn docs. Whew. From mdn docs, we'll do reference. I just hope I've not left anything out. Reference. Okay, so introduction, FreeCodeCamp, code newbie podcast, Scrimba podcast, get a dev job, build a portfolio, hash node, no CS degree, first timers only, prompt, mdn docs, reference. Okay, so I'll clean this one. Yeah, so that's it. Now we are done with our HTML. So for example, if I should click here, let's say if I should click build a portfolio, see what happens. Okay, so something is wrong with build a portfolio. Let me check. So I have hashtag build a portfolio. Build a portfolio. Let me see the text for the header. The header is also build a portfolio. How about okay, so this should have underscore instead of the space. Yeah, so now that should work as well. So for example, if I click build a portfolio, see, I come here to build a portfolio. If I click get a dev job, okay, so get a dev job is also not working. Let me see. Get a dev job. I'll just copy this. see what I wrote. Get a dev book instead of get a dev job. Yeah, get a dev job book. So let me just do it. Get a dev job. Now let me click. Yeah, so it seems everything is working now. So we are done with our HTML. So now we can begin to add some styling to it. But before we do that, I want us to run the test and see. So as you can see, when we run the test, all of the tests pass except, okay, so some of them are failing. Let's see the one that are failing. Each main session should have an ID that matches the text of its child. Having any spaces in the child's text replaced with underscore. Okay, so it seems one of them is wrong. So let's see. We have introduction, which is the same here. FreeCodeCamp, which is the same. We have Code Newbie Podcast, which is the same here. Oh, spelling mistake. So Code Newbie. All right, now let me run the test again, and I'm sure it will pass this time around. Yeah, so it passed. All right, now we have just one. Your technical document project should use at least one media query. Okay, we'll do that in the CSS. So it means we are good now. All right, so let's turn this into something like this. Okay. All right, so I'll do away with this HTML for now, and then we'll bring our CSS. Okay, so for the CSS, what we want to do is that we want to begin by working on the body elements. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is write body like so. Then want to give it a margin of 0. Want to remove all default margins and also all default paddings as well. So margin of 0, padding of 0. Then I want to use a different font. I'm not really feeling this font that we are currently having here. So I'll use a font called Helvetica. And then I'll give it a fallback font of sans serif. So in case the browser does not have Helvetica, then sans serif, which all browsers have, will be used instead. All right, then let's give it a background color. First, let's check if it's working. Okay, the font has changed, so we know our CSS is working. So I'll give it a background color of F5, F6, F7, which is like a very light color. It's almost white, but not too white. So it's similar to what we have here. Okay. Next up, I'll also give it a color for the text. This grayish color here, 0A23. Okay. All right. Then, as you can see here, we have our navigation here on the left, and we also have our navigation here on the we have our main documentation on the right. So to do that, I am going to use flex. So I'll give it a display of flex, and when I give it a display of flex, see what happens. So it's using the default flex direction of row. That's why you have the navigation here on the left, and you have your main element also here on the right. Okay, so let's continue. Now I want to work on the navbar itself. Currently, the way it's looking is nowhere close to how we want it to look like. So what I'm going to do first is to first select it. So navbar, I'm using the hash because it's an ID. So I'll say navbar, give it a display of flex, and then I'll give it a flex direction of column, so that instead of going left to right, it will go top to bottom. As you can see, okay, flex direction of column. Yeah, this is what we expect. Okay, now what I also want to do is I want to give it a border right. I'll say 1 pixels, solid gray. So that is for this line that you see right here. Okay, as you can see, we have a line here. Now the next thing I want to do is to work on the width. So I'll give it a width of 300 pixels, and I'll also give it a height. Currently, as you can see, we want to give it a height of 100 VH, which is view height. And as you can see, when I scroll, this also scrolls, but that's not how we want it. When you look at this, when we scroll, the navigation remains in place. So for us to get that kind of effect, what we are going to use, we are going to use position, and we'll give it a position of fixed. Okay, and then I'll also give it a left value of 0. Now when I scroll, you see our navigation is still in place. But now what is happening is that you can see that the main element is also sort of covering the navigation. So the way I'm going to deal with that is to select the main, and then I'll give it a position of absolute, then I'll give it a left value of 300 pixels. Okay, so that will push it away from the left, so that is now 300 pixels, which is the width of the navigation. That's why it's exactly on the line. So let me also give it a padding to push it away from the line. So I'll say padding, and I'll give it a value of 35. Let's see. Yeah, now we are making progress. So now if I click introduction, you see we have introduction. If I should click on FreeCodeCamp comes here. Sorry. If I should click on Scrimba shows up here. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is to work on the headers. As you can see, the headers are large and bold. So let's do that. So I'll select the headers, say header, and I'll give them a font size of 25 pixels. I will also give it a font weight of let me say 500. Let's see how it looks. Okay, so now the headers are looking closer to what we have in the final page. All right, let's continue. Now I want to work on the header in the navbar, this one. I want to give it some padding to get some space around it. So I will select the navbar, leave a space, and then write header. So what this will do is it will select the header inside of the navbar. So I'll just give it a padding of 25 pixels. Yeah, as you can see now, it has some breathing room around it. Okay, so as we've given the header some breathing room, let's also work on these links. Let's make it similar to what we have here. So the way I'm going to do that is to first select them. So I'm going to select the navbar and then select all the links inside it. So I'll leave a space and then write A. So first, let's give it a padding of 15 pixels. 25 pixels. Let's also give it a border top of I'll say 1 pixel solid, and then gray. So the border top will give it these lines that we have here. Okay, so as you can see, we have some padding around it. We also have border tops around it. Now, next thing I want to do is to remove the underline. So I'll just say text decoration, and I'll say none. I'll also give it the same color as we have here as the rest of the text. So I'll just copy this. Like so. Okay, so now we are making progress. Our site is almost the same as what we have here, but there's still a few things that we need to look at. So let's continue. Okay, so now I want to give you see these sessions, they are very close to one another, so I want to give them some space. So I want to separate them from one another. So I'll select it, main session. I'm using .main session because each one has a class of main session. I'll say margin bottom 35 pixels. As you can see now, there is a bit of space between each one. And I also want to give some spacing or padding. When you look at this, you see that the paragraphs underneath each of the heading is shifted to the left a little bit. So I want to use padding for that. So the way I'm going to do that is to say main session. Then I'll select all the paragraphs in the main session. Now I'll say padding 0. So 0 for the top and bottom because I don't need any padding for the top and bottom. And then 25 pixels for the left and right. Okay, so now as you can see, our paragraphs are shifted to the left just as we have in the final page. Now when you look at the final page, you can see also that these lists are also shifted further to the left. Okay, so let me work on that. So the way I'm going to do that is to also still select the main session, and I'll select the UL, which stands for unordered list, because the links are in the UL element. So I'll give it a padding left of let me say 75 pixels to push it further. Yeah, now as you can see, they are way to the left, and also there is some space between the list items. Okay, so let's add some space between them as well. So the way I'll do that is to say dot main session, bring my space, and then say li. So I'll say margin bottom 20 pixels. All right, now there is some space between the list elements. Okay. Next up, seems we're almost done. Yeah, so this is for the code. So as you can see here, this code has this grayish background. So yeah, and I don't want them displayed from left to right. I want it to be one on top of the other. So the way I'm going to handle that is to say code, because that's the name of the element. So I'll say code, give it a display of block. Okay, so the display of block will make it appear one on top of the other. I want to shift it to the left. So I'll say margin left. Let me say 50 pixels. I will also give it a margin bottom of 10 pixels. let me give you the background color of EE. Yeah, so now as you can see, they are separated and they all have this background color. So let me give you some padding just to make it stand out. So I'll say padding 10 pixels. I also want to give it a height. I'll give it a height of 20 pixels. Yeah, now they look good. Yeah, similar to what we have here. Okay, so moving on, I think we are almost done. Yeah, we are almost done. I think the only thing that is left for us to do is to work on the media queries. So let me show you something. So when I shrink the page, see what happens when I shrink the page. Okay, you see on smaller screen sizes, the navigation is on top of the main documentation, right? So that's what I want us to have something similar here. So the way I'm going to do it first, yeah, for ours, when we shrink this page, nothing happens. So when we shrink the page on a smaller screen size like what we have here, I want the navigation to come on top and then the rest of the documentation will be below. So the way we're going to achieve that is to use media queries. So the way we use media queries is to use the keyword media. Then I'm going to say max width, which will be the size at which I want the navigation to be on top and then the rest of the documentation to be below. So the size I'm going to choose is 750 pixels. Okay, and then I want to work on the navbar. Okay, so for big sizes or big screen sizes, I've given the navbar a width of 300. As you can see, where is it? It has a width of 300 pixels. But for smaller screen sizes, I want it to have a width of 100 pixels. So I will say navbar width should be 100, not 100 pixels, 100%. I want it to cover, because you can see it covers the entire screen on smaller screen sizes. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, as you can see, we have it covering the entire screen size. But let's deal with this. You see, this one is still shifted to away from the left. So we need to handle that as well. So I'm going to say main. I'm going to say left 0. Okay, so now, yeah, we have a mess, but let's deal with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give the navbar also a height. So I'll say 35 view height. Okay, then I'll give it an overflow of auto. So let me explain what this will do. So this, as you can see, will give our nav a height of 35 view height. Let me work on let me add a top view, a top property of 35, the same value 35 vh, so that you see what I'm talking about. Good. Now, as you can see, we have our navigation here, and it only ends at 35 view height. So unless you scroll, then the rest of the navigation will appear, right? Okay. And when we scroll to, you see that the documentation is going under the navigation. The navigation is fixed, but yeah, that is not the case here. So we need to work on that. With this, when I scroll, everything scrolls up. But here, when I scroll, not everything scrolls up. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to give the nav bar a position of relative. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, now when I scroll, everything scrolls up. Okay. Also, as you can see, there is this line here that's like a top border for the documentation. So let me add that as well. So I'm going to say border top for the main, and let me say 2 pixels solid, and then I'll give you the color of gray. All right, now let's work on this header. As you can see with this one, it is centered, okay? And also, when you scroll within the navigation, it sticks at the top, it doesn't move. It's only when we scroll from the documentation that it moves. So for us to achieve that kind of effect, what I am going to do is, I'm going to first select it. So I'll select the nav bar, and I'll select the header inside the nav bar. So I've left a space here. So the first thing I'm going to say is I want to give it a position of sticky. Then I'll give it a top value of 0. Okay. Now let me see. Yeah, as you can see, when I scroll, it doesn't move. Okay, it's only when I scroll from the entire documentation that it moves. But I also need to give it a background color so that we don't have this transparency here. So I will say, let me also give it a width of 100%. Then I'll give it a background color. I want it to have the same color as the rest of the document, so I'll copy this and then paste it here. Okay, now let's see what happens. Yeah, now you can scroll under it like so, and then when we scroll the whole thing, it moves alongside with it. So also we have to center align it. As you can see, this one is aligned in the center, so let's use text align. And give it a value of center. Yeah, now it's centered. Yeah, it seems it's a little bit to the left, so let me just give it a padding left of 0. Let's see. Yeah, now it looks centered. Finally, I just want to give it a border button, because that's not even, yeah, I'll say border button. I'll say 1 pixels solid gray as well. And I think that should be it. Yeah, so we have our technical documentation here. In this case, I decided to build a free dev resources page. So we have an introduction and we have 10 resources: FreeCodeCamp, Code Newbie, Scrimba Podcast, Hashnode, and a number of them. So now from here, if I should click this, you see it takes me to the introduction. If I click FreeCodeCamp, it takes me to FreeCodeCamp. If I should click Code Newbie, if I should click Scrimba, yeah, it works like that. Also, on very large screens, instead of having it on top, we have the navigation at the left rather. So as you can see, when I click introduction, it takes me to the introduction. If I click Scrimba, it takes me to Scrimba Podcast. If I click Code Newbie, it takes me to Code Newbie. Yeah, so that is it. Let's run the test again and see if we pass this time. So I'm going to run the test. Yeah, so everything passes. So as you can see, we've completed a third of the fifth certification project. So I'm just going to submit it. Yeah, and that's it. So I'm done with the technical documentation page. Yeah, so I am also going to be dropping videos on these ones as well. So do well to like and subscribe so that when I drop the videos on these ones, you are going to have it as well. Yeah, so that's it for this one. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one.